Welcome back to Nature League. When I'm at the Complexly office working on SciShow Psych or Nature League, I get to cross paths with some really fun and interesting people. Hank Green is one such person, though we've only been able to scratch the surface on some interesting personal topics while passing in the halls or filming something else. One of these topics is invasive species. Hank and I are both from Florida, where there are record numbers of invasive reptiles and amphibians. And we also enjoy learning, thinking, and feeling about ecological issues. Because of this, Hank and I have found ourselves talking about the intricacies of invasive species several different times, but always had to stop because we were doing something else. So we decided to take some time to sit down and finally talk through these topics in detail, and we recorded it to share with all of you. I was actually thinking it'd be cool to do a thought experiment. Okay. So perhaps let's say we're from a different planet. We're from somewhere else, coming down to Earth, and we're looking at laws and we're looking at scientific articles published, and we're seeing this phrase come up: invasive species or non-native species, exotic species. I want to approach it from that point of we've not heard of this.
Okay.
And we're investigating it, right? Okay. Here's humans, a species, talking about these other ones as invasive or non-native, and what do we think here? So gut reactions.
My first reaction, if I'm like a very intelligent alien, I think I see that those people, that species.
Yep, those ones standing on two legs doing the thing.
They are talking about species that affect them, not about species that affect their environment. Because if they were going to be talking about invasive species as species that hurt the environment, the number one obvious one is them.
They're like, but we'll ignore ourselves, moving on.
By far the most invasive species of all time.
Yeah.
By orders and orders and orders of magnitude. It's not like knapweed has dug a mountain into a pit.
Right.
That's only us.
Though that would be impressive.
I wouldn't say that no species, other species have big impacts on the environment, but not like we do.
I studied this for my undergrad. I did this while I was at University of Florida and was down in the Everglades and did some of the python work and all of the invasive herpetology, so amphibians and reptiles. And the law is pretty explicit, and it's actually the same for the United States and globally in the way that we say what something is when it's invasive. So for the US, there was in the 70s kind of an idea about exotic, and then it became invasive in 99.
Before exotic, we also just had weed.
Yeah,
which was just anything that any
sucks
plant
and bothers us.
That is I don't want you. It doesn't matter whether it's native or not.
Anything that you're sitting on the rocking chair, get out of my lawn.
And you can't just say exotic or non-native, because those there's lots of useful non-natives. It's not like apple trees are from America. They're just great, and we like them, and we want them to grow, so we don't consider apple trees invasive.
Right, and I think that was taken into consideration when then in 1999 what was signed in was the actual definition that we still use for invasive, which is when you have a non-native or exotic or alien, bunch of synonyms, but one of those that does harm.
Right.
And legally it says to economics, human, environment, not human, or human health, human.
Yeah.
So two of the three, how does it affect us? But that distinction is really important because of those that you just mentioned. I think about the honeybee and the millions of dollars of the industry. That's from Europe.
Yeah, they're not from around here.
They're not from around here. Please don't leave my lawn.
Right, yeah.
And there's something I think philosophically and definitionally little messed up about that. Again, if we're coming from a different place and we didn't know anything, and we're like, wait, you call that something different? Not only call it something different, but then have the legal jurisdiction to treat it differently and in fact kill it and eradicate it.
And also there's a moral element too in the environmental movement that that we have sort of this distaste for non-native invasive species. The knapweed is a beautiful plant. It is a beautiful flower. It's
just
whenever
aesthetically,
I'm this is gorgeous, but also the way that it's talked about is I think that there is some amount of concern about biodiversity, but largely it's just because cows can't eat it. It's we have this negative feeling toward it because it is not productive for us.
And I like that you brought in the word feeling, because I think that what we're up against here is both psychology and culture. When we think about, again, in our alien thought experiment, we would read the headlines coming from either Europe, United States. We'd read headlines about human and talking about literally invasions and the idea of non-native or alien. I mean, this is the way we talk about each other, even human to human. There's a militaristic
the invasive species. We needed a word to say that
it came in.
that it's not from here and that it persists. Because there's lots of things that you can plant in your yard that aren't gonna like spread out and become Australian pine or Phragmites or whatever. Like so like you need a word to talk about the things that like they go into the native ecosystem and they're like, actually, I'm extremely good at this. My natural predator isn't here.
I make a lot of babies and reproduce real young.
You guys aren't good at exploiting this niche at all. I am way better. Exactly.
That's what Burmese pythons did. With their arms and fingers.
It was
a
their
lot
finger
of that.
guns.
That's the one. There's also this idea of, in the United States, there's tens, I think like close to 50,000 species listed by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services as non-native. But only a couple thousand listed as potentially invasive. And there's that persistence element as well. So is it here, but then how's it doing? When I was doing the python work, we found one of the world records for python sebae, which is a different species. It's the African rock python, not the Burmese python. But we found the world record for length for a male, and then also found some others that were gravid, so they had eggs and that were fertilized and like doing great. And there was an argument at the time, this was in the late 2008, 2009, about do we list this? And when do you list it as official on the Florida state registry of like, this is an invasive species? And I was looking around and I thought to myself, it's book 5. We don't want to say Voldemort's back because it'll make people panic, but Voldemort is definitely back, and why is everybody not looking at this python sebae specimen we just found?
But like, what if, and it was, it turns out. So it's just like Fish and Wildlife Service is just like led by Cornelius Fudge and doesn't want everyone to know about it.
Right, that is correct.
I want to go further and talk about hippos in South America.
Ooh, me too, let's do it.
Where
I always want to do that.
These are an invasive species now. They were brought in as zoo animals, basically, to show off. But there were a bunch of aquatic mammals that went extinct when humans arrived in South America.
Yes.
And so the hippos are kind of taking over that niche that had been vacated by natural species that were there that we killed. Or that were killed when the big cats reached South America. So like there's kind of a space for them. And so the question is like, at what point are they native? Because like every species invaded at one point in the past.
Yep. There's an issue with when we say in the legal definitions, both for the US and worldwide, for like the Convention on Biological Diversity, World Wildlife Fund, these huge groups, they list it, right? It's saying, you're non-native if this is not your current or past natural range. And so now we get to this word natural, and there becomes this massive dividing line between humans and nature. Because we do not consider something non-native if it just dispersed. We say naturally, if it naturally dispersed somewhere. We call it non-native if humans brought it in. Follow that logic, and that's saying humans are not natural.
So this is really on the edge of a very big discussion.
I know, I'm sorry.
I can, obviously environmental philosophy is a big topic. I can see the argument that we are not natural. Of course we are. Of course we are biological, we are animals, yes, but instead examine it from the angle of, okay, this animal or plant, this organism did not reach this place through biological means, it reached it through technological means. If I had an insect in my hair and I brought it on and I went to South America, that's a biological transmissal of that.
But we don't distinguish that legally.
But
like ballast water in a ship versus hitchhiking on pants, we do not distinguish. We just say a human did it.
But also if it's hitchhiking on my pants, if I walk to South America, that's natural. I'm not going to. So I can see using the word natural as a shortcut, but I think that we need to be honest with ourselves that there are two things we're protecting. One, economics.
Money,
And the other is this idea of a pristine, perfect, natural environment, which isn't a real thing.
And the us and the them. And that's exactly, when I think about the main points that are brought up about invasive species, it is that they harm environments, they harm biodiversity, and they harm money. Money, well, guess what? That's our own thing. We say what we prioritize, and we put money in to do it. That's on us.
If it's cost, zebra mussels are a huge problem for hydroelectric plants. They cost money, and so we spend money to fix that problem.
And it's all right, that's on you guys. This first one about they harm ecosystems, again, this goes to this it's a fallacy. This balance of nature and this pristine idea and these lines that have been drawn that might have worked in the 1970s. I mean, it wasn't right back then, but a prevailing thought. How can you be someone who loves biology and not recognize that evolution is at play here? How can you, on the one hand, promote things changing over time, and on the other hand say, this is the ecosystem?
The way to do that is to say the change is happening much faster now, and that is causing an unnatural amount of extinction.
But then the question is, if humans are another species just playing this game, if you can't adapt and survive to these changes, then extinction, like, is it not fair to say, and if something else does, that is not what then lives there?
Is the question you're asking, is mass extinction okay because it's natural?
Not necessarily, but when we think about the secession of things and say this non-native is outcompeting this native species, it comes to, again, this psychological and cultural idea of us and the other. So like I think about a local example, which is a rainbow trout introgression, so the like movement of genes in, or like interbreeding, hybridization, interbreeding between them and native cutthroat trout. And this idea of, and this is like verbatim from like publications and things, we need to protect and maintain the natural genetic resource that is the cutthroat trout genome, right? Like, we brought the rainbow trout in. Like, what is this protecting a native genome? What is this protecting a native ecosystem besides this kind of psychological bias of like a little bit of evolved xenophobia? Like, it feels
a little xenophobic. It feels a little like who's the guy who wrote the
Fudge, Cornelius Fudge.
the art
Nailed it.
It also seems like a little pre-Darwin, when we were like we didn't really understand that organisms changed, and we didn't understand that extinction happened. Like there was a period that was, it's weird to think, but the idea of extinction is a relatively new idea.
Which is really wild. It's very cool. So there's pieces of that I just don't know wind up being justified. And then we get to this ethical or moral piece, which is, what is the responsibility? So what I like to ask on this channel and ask myself like daily, if not hourly, is like, what does a good, happy, and healthy Anthropocene look like? So what does a good, happy, and healthy era look like that is dominated and influenced by humans? What does that look like? And one of those is, okay, if you want to eradicate something because it was not originally in this place, did humans bring it there? In which case, where does that responsibility lie? Like when we were removing those pythons, like you had a bunch of Swedish kids out there that love snakes. We loved those snakes. Like we're
studying snakes because we love snakes.
We love snakes, but then the fact that they then need to be killed and then research and whatever, like there was something in the back of my mind that was like, this sucks. Like this snake did not ask to be released into the Everglades. It lives in Burma. Like where does responsibility fall?
Ultimately, I might be wrong, not concerned about the life of the individual python. Brad the python is a good guy.
Rest in peace, Brad.
He didn't have a choice in the matter.
He did. He fought pretty hard, actually. On our trip, only one person got bitten, and he got bitten twice.
2 different incidents? Yes. Oh, God. Those guys don't let go. You can kill it, and it'll still be biting you.
That is correct.
So I'm glad to have never been bitten by any constrictor. Or any snake. Well, I've been bitten by snakes, but only little ones. I think that ultimately, if it is harm to biodiversity, if it actually is like having this like demonstrable negative impact on the rest of the environment, if they're eating all of the rabbits and there will be no rabbits left and then they themselves will go extinct because they ate all the rabbits, like that seems like we can try to fix this problem, but life
caused it.
Finds a way. And like in general, invasive species management is almost never about invasive species eradication unless you're talking about
it's almost impossible.
A very small space, like a small island, and you can like really, drive the snakes out of Ireland.
Yeah, but why?
There were never snakes in Ireland. Were there snakes in Ireland? That was what St. Patrick was supposed to say, that he drove the snakes out of. That's one of his miracles. Saint Snakes Day. We should have a Saint Snakes Day.
Ooh. Again, getting a little ethical, moral ground here, but why do those rabbits have more of a right by humans than that snake?
So I think that in at least modern ecology when I was learning it, because they have a role in the ecosystem that they are playing, and without the rabbits, other ecosystem things might fall to pieces.
And then finding that that's not
the thing. Is since my education, been reading about sometimes when invasive species come in and biodiversity increases.
Yeah, local biodiversity can go up, absolutely.
And it's just like, oh, come on. It's
No.
all very confusing.
It is, and I'm living in this confusion, gray area of rebuilding right now that I'm thankful for, but also hate. It's just what we thought and what we knew.
Yeah.
But there was such, like, I just thought it was so easy, and some of that comes from being younger and studying this at a younger age, but none of it is black and white, and it's nuanced, and we're in that gray area.
Yeah.
But I'm proud to be in that gray area because I think I'm thinking more critically, and the fact that I'm bothered and like doing this when I read a new paper is good because I like to challenge my assumptions. You know.
The other thing that's good about it is that like we're doing the research to figure out that, for example, invasive mussels in America have super decreased biodiversity. Like there were many, many species of freshwater mussels, and there are now much fewer.
Outcompeted, yeah.
So in that case, you can see that like you've got now one species, and that's probably not good. It's better to have a diversity of species because they're doing, you create opportunities for evolution and for survival.
But the job could be filled, that niche could be filled the same way you're talking about hippos in South America. Like,
well, but if it's filled by one species, then you open up a whole can of worms of like why is biodiversity better than less diversity? I think more diversity is better than less diversity. I think that both on a moral level and on a scientific level. And I'm not saying that there isn't a moral level there. I think like honestly, I think like when it comes to like my sort of like base level of morality, I actually think that diversity has a big piece to play in it because it is where like interestingness and a fight against entropy happens.
Well, we should never fight entropy, Hank. It's a law of thermodynamics. It's going to increase. Why are you fighting
is the only thing to fight.
It is literally a law that it increases.
We can slow it down.
Who are you, Delta G?
I'm not saying that we're going to win.
Gibbs free energy here to stay.
We're going to slow it down. I'm talking about energy flows rather than just the idea of randomness.
Okay, sure.
So I think
like an exothermic reaction? Like
I'm saying that like the more diversity of life on the planet, the better the planet is at capturing and utilizing the energy that hits it.
From the sun.
Yeah. Or is on it. This is like personal philosophy stuff that I never talk about.
I love that. This is me every day, every hour, but it's me alone and like maybe my cat in my lap
like
and I'm stressed out.
If there's gonna be anything to sort of like be like in favor of, I think that it's capturing and utilizing energy.
Sure.
Which is a weird thing.
But it's not because that's everything.
Yeah,
for life.
Yeah.
The planet, by the way, is gonna be fine. We're not saving the rock that is Earth. For me, and this is a personal philosophy thing, like it is the saving and caring for the things very much so alive and capable of being distressed and killed, right?
Yeah, the beautiful things.
Yeah,
all of the beautiful things, and I count us among them. Like I think that we are a super cool species, very, very weird, very unique, really, in terms of the history of the Earth, very unprecedented, at least. So I'm a huge fan of humans. I do think that like ultimately responsibility does rest on us a little bit to decrease the harm that we have on natural ecosystems.
Sure.
I think that it's extremely important that we continue to do the research on like what actually is the things doing the harm.
Right.
Because ultimately, probably what we find is that like habitat destruction is far more of an impact than
I'm doing this
invasive
for my
species.
dissertation, and I looked at the numbers like 2 weeks ago, and it is definitely habitat. I don't know why I'm doing this, like it's a secret. The number one cause of biodiversity loss in terms of actual extinctions, things need somewhere to live. It is very straightforward.
Right. Yeah, and like mice can live in a wheat field, but not much else. Like, and if you fly over America, like look down. It's not a bunch of forests. It's not a bunch of natural prairies. It's circle pivots. Like that's it.
Yeah.
And we gotta eat. We're very good at like keeping our children alive because like that's our primary driver.
Right.
Like that's what we want, to not die and have babies and have our babies not die. Like it's
kind of the thing.
Life. That's biology.
Kind of the thing.
In some ways right now, and I think that it would be better if we recognize this more, we have a surplus with which to plan for the future, to like help a world exist that will continue being able to sustain us and other life forms.
We're really bad about
still
long thinking though.
Being beautiful and weird and amazing and having things to learn about, but also like having that surplus to take care of people who aren't our kids too. So both environments and humans.
Yeah, environments and humans and all of the non-humans as well, just things alive. and not alive, but maybe doing things with energy.
Even
and,
not alive things, like Grand Canyon is very beautiful. It's super dead. Like super made out of rocks, but like
super rocks.
Very,
Awesome
very
rocks.
good. Very good though.
Official stance. Grand Canyon rocks, very good. Thank you for thinking about these things out loud. Again, I usually do this alone and just get very stressed out.
Right.
Having someone else do it and getting stressed out with me is so much easier.
Right.
No, you're not as stressed as I am. I feel like,
I'm worried. Like, I'm very worried about the future of
Yeah.
humans on the planet, but I've also seen us solve a lot of big problems before.
Yeah, I think so. And as long as we're keeping all the other players in mind and like, again, keeping a little bit of that responsibility in mind,
Right.
especially if it's like we moved that species from here to here, it's now causing trouble. Like there's cause and effect. And hey, we'll just keep following the research and I think we're gonna keep learning that it's so complex and it's this icky, terrible, wonderful gray area. And I guess we'll just like keep exploring it together.
I'm sorry you had to kill a bunch of pythons even though they're not gonna leave the Everglades.
They're absolutely not gonna leave it. Cornelius Fudge is the worst. Even with setting aside time to explicitly talk about invasive species, Hank and I still didn't get to all the nuances involved or the overarching themes of humans and nature. However, we did suss out some basics, like how scientific evidence doesn't necessarily support widespread ecological ideas like pristineness, balance, or nativeness. What remains to be figured out is human responsibility and how our values play a role in the way we think and feel about invasive species. So, what do you think? Let us know in the comments below and let's continue the conversation there. And to keep going on Life on Earth adventures with us each week, go to youtube.com/natureleague, subscribe and share. Hey guys, to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of Nature League, we made these really cool pins and they're for sale on dftba.com. So if you'd like your own and want to be a part of the Nature League, check out the link in the description. Thanks so much for supporting us.